Hello and welcome to The Essential Reads. My name is Isaac, and today, because I now have 15,000 subscribers, we're going to be reviewing Wuthering Heights by Emerald Fennell. If you're coming across this channel for the first time, I am a voice actor and audiobook narrator, and last year, I narrated Wuthering Heights for this channel. And you can find that audiobook wherever you listen to podcasts, or also here on this YouTube channel. The link is somewhere up here, and it's also in the description box. I loved the book, and while it took me a little while to get into it, I fell in love with the novel by the end of it. I've already heard a lot about Emerald Fennell's adaptation, and while I tried to go into the movie with an open mind, I cannot say that I was looking forward to it. Sadly, this movie is still in the cinema, so I can't get any clips apart from the ones that are shown in the trailer to put into this video. Because of that, this video is going to be a little bit different than how I thought I was going to do it originally. I was inspired a bit by Legal Eagle's style of doing things, where he watches the movie at the same time and reacts, but I can't do that because the movie's in the cinema. So there's going to be a recap of the film, a discussion of the characters, and then, what I liked about the film, etc, etc, etc. You know how this works. Now, before we get into my review of the movie, I think it's important to set some ground rules. What makes a good adaptation? A good adaptation is something that's very difficult to do, and it's something that I'm sure every book fan will disagree on. We've all got different opinions of what a good review means to us. We all had a different experience of the book, everyone has their different opinions. But to me, a good adaptation of a book is one that respects the source material. By respecting the source material, I mean you have to hit all of the main themes of the book. The characters are similar to their book counterpart, but probably with a bit less depth because you only have 2 hours as opposed to 30 chapters to develop them properly. And the setting is more or less correct. I'm not a zealot, though. You can remove stuff. And you can make changes. It's totally fine. One of my favourite book adaptations ever is The Shawshank Redemption. Casting Morgan Freeman as Red is nuts when you think about the original book, but you know what? It works so well. The Lord of the Rings removes tons of stuff and just keeps the main plot. We don't get Tom Bombadil, and at the end of The Return of the King, we don't have the scourging of the Shire. But you know what? 99% of book fans love the Lord of the Rings movies. They change things, but respect the source material enough to be loved and respected. We don't talk about the Hobbit movies, though. In The Hunger Games, Cato gets a little speech right before he dies. It's a great addition to the film. It added way more depth and sorrow to his character. It's a great change. My hot take is that movies aren't really the right medium for book adaptations. They need to be a series, probably around 6 or 8 episodes long. Refer to the 1990s version of Pride and Prejudice with Colin Firth. It's just, chef's kiss. As a super basic definition, an adaptation should make people who haven't read the book want to read the book. And it should give something more, or extra, to the people who have read the book. How to do Wuthering Heights. So, to do Wuthering Heights justice, you would need to touch on the themes of the British class system, racism, revenge, obsession, and generational trauma. All of this while somewhere in the north of England with a decent amount of rain and fog. It is Gothic literature after all. You'll hear me say this a lot in this video. Heathcliff would have to be darker skinned, not just a white dude with a tan. Emerald Fennell is known for making raunchy movies. We all loved Saltburn, and we all danced again to Murder on the Dance Floor. And she won an Oscar for Best Original Screenplay for Promising Young Woman in 2021. She's a good writer. But because of these movies, when I saw that she was going to be adapting Wuthering Heights by Emily Bronte, I was a little bit scared. It's a very unsexy book, but seeing as I read it for the first time as an adult, I can understand how a younger person could, in a f***ed-up way, see it as a love story. There is love, obsession in the book. Everything until now I've written before seeing the movie. So after this point, everything that I will be saying will have spoilers. So if you want to see the movie without spoilers, or you want to read the book without spoilers, or listen to my audiobook, links in description, go do that now and come back to this video later, because I am going to be going in depth. Now, without further ado, I've just finished watching Wuthering Heights at the cinema. That was the movie. Was it an adaptation of Wuthering Heights? Some could say, maybe. But, not a fantastic one. That was a movie. That was indeed a movie. The movie opens with a hanging, and immediately we get that Emerald Fennell flair because the criminal has a huge erection, letting the audience know that we're gonna be in for a Emerald Fennell sexual movie. Some people then shag in the street. It's a really weird way to open a movie, but I suppose it's Emerald Fennell, that's her flair. We then travel north of the village towards Wuthering Heights, a large house which is shown to be in ruin and disrepair. Mr. Earnshaw then comes home with a boy, and the maids mention something being wrong with the kid, and they go to ask him if the child's going to be staying with them. He says that people in town were abusing the child, and he told them that in Yorkshire they don't bully children like that, so he takes the boy home and proceeds to bully him. In the meantime, Kathy, his daughter, is shown sneaking around a bedroom upstairs, and on looking under the bed, she finds the boy. She runs downstairs with him and proclaims to her father that she has named the boy Heathcliff, after her deceased brother. And Mr. Earnshaw says that Kathy can have him as a pet. Not a friend, not a brother, a pet. Kathy tries to be nice to him by teaching him how to talk properly and how to read, but Kathy has no patience to teach, and Heathcliff no patience to learn. But they're always seen together, running around on the moors, and one day they get caught out in a rainstorm and seek refuge under some sort of weird stone gazebo. You can kind of see it in the trailer, it's a weird structure, not natural, but whatever. Heathcliff tells Kathy that they need to go home and can't wait for the storm to pass, clearly afraid what their dad's gonna say. But Kathy refuses. She says the storm will pass, that she can see some blue in the distance. But the storm doesn't pass. And when they eventually get home, they're late for supper, and their father's furious with them. The food is cold, and he throws it on the floor, a waste of food. Very strange thing to do, considering that they live in squalor. But anyway, Heathcliff tries to protect her sister from her father's wrath by saying it was because of him that they were late, not Kathy, and he's then physically beaten for it. Kathy, later that night, goes to see if Heathcliff's okay, but he's crying in his room, and he's bleeding from his back from being whipped. Jump cut? Suddenly Kathy's no longer 12 years old, and while she's supposed to be, 20? She's now Margot Robbie and looks much older, though only a few years have passed. Heathcliff and Catherine still spend all of their time on the moors, and soon it's announced that a large house nearby has been purchased and that they will have neighbours. On the moors, Kathy jokes to Heathcliff that the new neighbour will fall in love with her, but as a week goes by, their new neighbours have not visited them. And when you see the house that they live in, Thrushcross Grange, and compare it to Wuthering Heights, it's like, yeah, I get it, they live in a shithole, and Thrushcross Grange is f***ing beautiful. But, vexed and determined, Catherine sets off to Thrushcross Grange to see why they haven't been visited. She climbs up the wall and looks over it to see two people. Edgar, Shazad Latif, and Isabella, Alison Olivia, drinking empty teacups. Isabella notices Kathy and screams, causing Kathy to fall. And when Edgar goes to investigate, he opens the door and finds Catherine in what can only be described as a paint me like one of your French girls poses, with a sprained ankle. Because the Heights is about 10 miles away, she cannot walk home with a sprained ankle, so she spends the next 6 weeks at the Lintons and is treated for the first time like a proper lady. And when she comes back to Wuthering Heights, she's fancily dressed and her hair is taken care of. It's noticed by others that she's been changed by her time at the Grange, but honestly, you can't really tell in the movie. In the movie, she's only changed superficially. Some more time goes by, and during this time, she goes to check on Heathcliff, who's upset with her new behaviour and manners. But before she can find him, she's interrupted by the groundskeeper, Joseph, and one of the maids, Zilla, who are sneaking into the barn, where Heathcliff sleeps, to shag. Kathy seems to know nothing about sex by this point in the movie and watches through the gaps in the floorboard. Joseph puts something like a horse's bridle around Zilla's head and puts the bit in her mouth, setting the film up to be full of BDSM a la 50 Shades of Grey. But Heathcliff was also apparently upstairs, and he covers Kathy's mouth and eyes, laying on top of her, so that she can't see or scream when she hears what they're doing. The two are very embarrassed, and we can only assume that while Kathy has only seen this once, Heathcliff's probably watched, or at least heard, this event many times. In the day, Kathy goes to the moors for some privacy, where, after her sexual awakening, she pleasures herself, thinking about Heathcliff. He goes out looking for her, and sees her in the act. I'm very surprised I remember all these details. I was so bored during the movie. I looked at my watch 3 times to see how much longer was left. A few days later, Kathy's talking to Nellie, and she says that Edgar has proposed to her. She says to Nellie that she's accepted, but that she feels very conflicted, for while she loves Edgar, and her heart belongs to him, her soul belongs to Heathcliff. Something from the book. Finally, something from the book! Nellie notices that Heathcliff is nearby, though. He tries to listen to their conversation, and he hears Kathy say that she cannot marry him, as he's too rough and wild and has no money, while Edgar is a real gentleman, and is absolutely loaded. But before hearing Kathy go on to say that she really does truly love Heathcliff, he leaves, seemingly forever. And after a full year of waiting for him to return, Kathy finally decides to marry Edgar. We then watch what can only be described as a Charlie XCX music video. It's full of pomp and dresses and colour and sex, and it's beautifully shot, and Kathy's new life at the Grange begins. I was quite weirded out at one point, because I watch a lot of anime, and this just kind of took me fully out of the movie because I nearly laughed. But why the heck does Edgar Linton's mantelpiece look like Maito's domain expansion from Jujutsu Kaisen? It was just really out of place. There are a lot of hands in this movie, but it was just so out of place to me as an anime fan. It was just really weird. 5 years go by, and Kathy is pregnant with Edgar's child. But one night, she finds some eggs in her bed, a prank that she played on Heathcliff when they were younger, and she knows that he must be back in the area. She goes to the heights, and through the fog he emerges. He's shaved, fancily dressed, and has a golden tooth to replace the one that was knocked out by his father. A real charmer. Kathy is overjoyed, and invites him to dine at the Grange, where he's strangely welcomed by Edgar, and drooled over by Isabella. He's invited to stay with them, but lets them know that he'll actually be staying at the Heights, which he's just bought from their father. The Heights is an even bigger shithole than before. All their father has done in the interim is drink and gamble all of his money away. And at one point in the movie, I don't remember exactly when, Catherine goes to visit her father, and he's all jaundiced and drunk, and he berates her for believing herself superior to him. So she gives him some money and falls onto the floor, or she throws the money onto the floor more so, and he forces her to watch him pick it up from the ground, feeling like he had to grovel for it. All Heathcliff wants is for Kathy to be with him, for her to forget Edgar and to marry him instead. And it seems that Kathy has remembered her love for him, or never really gotten over her love for him. And they then start an affair. We have another music video by Charlie XCX, but this time it's just Kathy and Heathcliff shagging. There's a scene when they're being intimate in a carriage, and the whole time I just couldn't help thinking, where's the driver? Someone must have driven it to where it's parked. How on earth did they not see 6'4" Jacob Elordi Heathcliff making his way to the carriage? Another moment that 100% took me out of the movie, but I wasn't really in it to begin with. At a different point a bit later on in the movie, I think after this, their father dies, and Kathy's sad about it at first, but when she gets to the Heights, she cries a little and then decides to kick his bloated corpse. It's a great family. After this, we're shown his funeral, and Heathcliff and Catherine sneak off afterwards to snog, and he takes off her black mourning veil. It's really cool imagery. She's already had her pure white veil moment with Edgar, and now she has her unpure black veil bride moment with him. Edgar eventually tells Kathy that she has to stop seeing Heathcliff, and instead of going to the sexy rendezvous that they planned 5 minutes before, she stays at home, which prompts Heathcliff to come to the Grange. She goes to him in the garden, and in the dark, tells him that they can no longer continue their affair. But they're interrupted by Edgar, who goes to check on her in the cold, and he can't see Heathcliff in the dark. He tells her to come inside for the sake of their unborn son. Heathcliff then breaks into Catherine's room to ask her whether the child is his, and she lets him know that she knew she was pregnant before he came back. They then go to shag again on the dining room table after this confession. It's super romantic. Catherine's just like, Heathcliff, I am pregnant with another man's child. I don't care, Kathy. I love you. Let me have a look up your skirt. Eventually she tells him to stop, which he does. Consent. Finally understanding that what she's doing to Edgar isn't good. Heathcliff leaves, and then he breaks into Isabella's room, and because she's done nothing but drool over him for the past hour, he shags her, seemingly wanting to get back at Catherine. How the f*** this is a love story? I don't know. Edgar and Catherine find out that Isabella is in love with Heathcliff, and they try to forbid her from seeing him, but she runs off, and the two get married in the local church. Isabella's now living with Heathcliff at Wuthering Heights, and she starts writing letters to Nellie and describes all these awful things that Heathcliff is doing. We find out that these letters are being written by Isabella, but dictated by Heathcliff, as he can't write. It made me feel like he wasn't actually being an evil bastard to Isabella like he is in the book. It's just part of this weird sex game that they're playing. He's trying to make Cathy jealous, but every letter that comes for her, Nellie throws into the fire before she can get it, trying her best to distance Cathy from Heathcliff as much as possible. There's a point in the movie where Nellie goes to the Heights to see Isabella, and she finds her chained up wearing a metal dog collar, pretending to be a dog in what can only be described as pet play. We don't kink shame, but what the f***? It kind of made me think about Mr. Earnshaw saying something about Heathcliff being Cathy's pet. Heathcliff now has a pet of his own. Cathy's getting sick. We think that this is because she's unable to see Heathcliff, which is kind of true, and a bit book accurate, because that would be nice to see in a book adaptation. But she tells Nellie that she thinks that she's lost her baby. Nellie dismisses this as Catherine hasn't had her period. Some time goes by and Cathy continues to get sicker and sicker, and it's revealed that she did in fact lose the baby, and that she's going into septic shock from the decomposing fetus. Nellie runs to Edgar to tell him what's happened, and he then runs for a doctor who tries to use leeches to fix her. The past sucked. And then the next day, maybe, Catherine dies. She bleeds everywhere and everyone is distraught. Nellie runs to the Heights to tell Heathcliff, and he rides like the wind to Catherine at the Grange. Edgar tries to stop him at the door, but it doesn't work. He pushes through, he walks up the stairs, and he removes the sheet that's covering her, or I suppose you could say her veil again, and kisses her corpse. How romantic. What the f*** did I just watch? People in the movie around me were crying. I think they, really enjoyed it, but not for me. It's not for me. As someone who loved the book, it's not for me. But before we get into the bad, or the changes, let's talk about what I liked. The movie was stunning. The colours were great, the lighting was good, we could actually see what was happening in dark or night scenes. Every other film, please take note. I was very happy and pleasantly surprised by there being no nudity in the movie. We see the outline of the hanged man's cock at the start of the movie, but there's no more nudity after that. I thought it was going to be full of it, so I'm actually really happy for that. The soundtrack was good. It was interesting, but it didn't feel out of place with the story that Emerald Fennell was trying to tell. I don't know enough about costumes from that time period to properly comment on the costuming. If you want to get into that, there are plenty of creators out there who can talk about it, like Karolina Zebrowska. Her video is linked below. The costumes looked great, though, for the story that Emerald Fennell was trying to tell. Which is, I think, my ultimate review of this movie. It's great for the story that she's trying to tell, but that story isn't Wuthering Heights. Now, let's get into the changes. The characters. When I talk about the casting of this movie, I'm at no point judging the actors for their ability to act. I'm purely talking about the casting choices in the film and the changes from the book to the movie. The character order may at first be a little bit weird, but in my head it makes sense not to start with Cathy and Heathcliff. So, let's begin with Mr. Earnshaw. I actually have zero issues with the casting when we factor in Cathy being changed to be blonde. I think it works well. But the character was fully changed. Not the same in the book at all. In the book, Mr. Earnshaw goes away to Liverpool and then comes back home after a long period of time with Heathcliff. Is it his own child from an affair? Is it an orphan that he picked up along the way? We don't know. But he comes back with a child and treats Heathcliff like his own. Heathcliff is treated well by his father. He is educated, fed, and loved by Mr. Earnshaw. So when he dies, everything is flipped on its head. Hindley, Cathy's older brother, comes home with his wife after being sent away for school, becomes the new head of the house, and takes out his revenge on Heathcliff for being loved by Mr. Earnshaw more than he was. I truly believe that if Mr. Earnshaw lived long enough to see Heathcliff into adulthood, then he wouldn't have turned into the monster that he became. So by removing Hindley and putting all of his terrible traits into Mr. Earnshaw, you remove any possible hope for Heathcliff. He's adopted and immediately turned into a glorified servant and punching bag. He's only ever loved by Cathy, which removes a ton of depth from his character. Cathy. I think that Charlotte Mellington's casting as young Margot Robbie was good, but the massive age jump from young Cathy to what's supposed to be in the movie 20-year-old Cathy is so large that it's unbelievable. But when you cast a 35-year-old to play a teenager and a young 20-ish-year-old, that's what you're gonna get. Margot. I understand that she's a producer on the movie, and my Australian pride shines through seeing Margot and Jacob Elordi act together in this movie. Queensland, baby! But Margot Robbie was not the right person to play Catherine Earnshaw. Even if they decided to get a dark brown or black wig on Margot's head and use brown contacts to make her look more like the character, it doesn't change the fact that, spoiler alert for a 179-year-old book, Catherine dies at age 19. Margot Robbie's 35, and while Margot is absolutely gorgeous, she's far too old to be playing Catherine. I just can't help feeling that by casting Margot Robbie in this film, it was a way for Emerald Fennell, a blonde-haired, blue-eyed woman, to self-insert herself into the narrative. Which makes sense when she said that the movie was more like how she felt when reading the novel as a teenager. Now, we have plenty of cases where older actors play teenagers. In Euphoria, where Jacob Elordi got praised skillfully for playing a massive piece of this was the case. But there are limits to this. And even though the characters were aged up a bit to make the actors playing them seem a bit more believable, it was nonetheless strange to see someone play young when they just aren't. I'll go into this later in a bit more detail. The role should have gone to someone like Emilia Jones or Daisy Edgar Jones, who are still in their 20s, or Emma Mackey, who, while 30 years old, we've seen her play a high schooler in Sex Education. It could probably work. How was she changed from the book character? So, there are moments when she resembles book Cathy, but I just can't help feeling that she's shallower than book Cathy. The reason that Cathy's marriage to Edgar in the book works is because we see the changes that come over her once she spends time at Thrushcross Grange. I think that this would have worked better in the movie if Cathy was still played by a younger version of herself when she first goes to the Grange, and then is aged up sometime before saying that Edgar proposed. By allowing more time to pass, we, the audience, would be more likely to believe that she does love Edgar. In the book, the readers feel that she really does love him because we've had a couple of chapters to establish it, which makes her confession to Nellie when Edgar actually proposes even more painful. She's split in two. Her heart belongs to Edgar, but her soul to Heathcliff, and we, the reader, feel this. But in the movie, this all felt rushed and made me feel like she only married Edgar for his money, which is then reinforced by the montage of dresses, garden parties, and food. The relationship that she has with Edgar just seems superficial in the movie, whereas in the book, Cathy really does love him. I don't think that Cathy and Heathcliff would have had a real affair in the book, and while the story is told from Nellie's perspective and we only know what she knows, I just can't believe that the book would have continued in the way it does if they were able to be intimate with each other. Heathcliff would have probably just murdered Edgar if he realised that he could truly have Cathy. Her character was just kind of reduced to, I'm gonna marry this guy because he has money, but I'm really in love with my childhood best friend. In the book, Cathy is cruel and manipulative. In the movie, there's only one moment where Cathy's shown as being cruel. She pulls on Isabella's hair at one moment, but apart from that, she's just a normal woman. In the book, Cathy's sometimes as cruel as Heathcliff. She eggs Heathcliff on to punch Edgar. She's incredibly selfish throughout the whole book. So many of her actions are motivated by wanting to punish others or punish Heathcliff. She's incredibly manipulative and she constantly throws tantrums when she doesn't get her way, and she lies all the time. So much of her character was stripped away in this movie, which is weird because Cathy's entire character arc could be shown in this movie. She dies when the movie ends. The other characters in the book have to live on with the consequences of her actions, but she is the only character who has the opportunity to be fully developed, and she just isn't. She's just a hollow shell of what the character could have been. Heathcliff. Owen Cooper did a great job playing young Heathcliff, and I would have liked to have seen more of him. When he's beaten by his father, I really felt sorry for him afterwards. He did a great job, and I cannot wait to see more of him. We need more diversity in British cinema and telly. In terms of casting, he was cast after Jacob Elordi, so it was just a job of finding someone who could fit, and it works fine. Jacob Elordi. I don't know how much I need to go into this, but here's a quote from chapter 1 of the book. He is a dark-skinned gypsy in aspect, in dress and manners, a gentleman. Jacob Elordi is great, and I was truly impressed by his performance as the creature in Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein. And in Saltburn, another movie by Emerald Fennell, he was very good and played a posh English kid very well. But deciding to cast Jacob as Heathcliff shows a very deep misunderstanding of Wuthering Heights. The racial prejudices and actions taken towards Heathcliff because of these prejudices are some of the direct motivators for his actions in the book. It could have been so easy to cast someone like Dev Patel to play Heathcliff, and while I understand that directors have favourite actors, like we always see Michael Cera with Wes Anderson or Leonardo DiCaprio with Martin Scorsese, Jacob Elordi could very easily have been cast to play the role of Hindley, allowing Emerald Fennell to work with her favourite actor, while keeping the casting of Heathcliff as authentic as possible. As a child, Heathcliff is bullied and beaten by Hindley for being Daddy's favourite, but the moment that Mr. Earnshaw dies, Hindley decides that Heathcliff is no longer allowed to live like he and Cathy are. He needs to work in the field all day under Joseph's supervision, and he can no longer be educated except with Joseph's religious lectures, which are a punishment and not really meant to teach anything. And while you could argue that these actions are primarily motivated by Hindley hating Heathcliff for being his father's favourite, the fact that Heathcliff is of a different race nonetheless plays a part. Again, Heathcliff is not white. How is he different from the book? This is a strange thing to write about because Heathcliff isn't supposed to be seen as romantic. And while the worst of him only comes out after Catherine's death, he's nonetheless a spiteful, nasty person while she's alive. He becomes worse after Cathy's death, but when he's younger, he is still very capable of and shown committing acts of violence. In the book, he punches Edgar in the face, and in the letters that Isabella writes to Nellie, he is described as a devil. And then, once Isabella finally escapes his clutches, there are allusions not just to physical violence, but sexual violence towards his tricked wife. All of Heathcliff's actions are dedicated to making Catherine feel like shit for not marrying him. But the movie stops at Catherine's death, so we don't get the next part of his story. This is probably to keep the illusion that Wuthering Heights is the greatest love story ever told. Heathcliff's not supposed to be romantic. Heathcliff is supposed to be a monster, not some long-lost love that just wants to shag Catherine and will sometimes get angry. He hangs a dog. By not adapting the end of the book, all of Heathcliff's evil is just erased. He's just a man with a childhood who's in love with some other dude's wife. In the book, he is a malevolent monster who beats up children to take revenge on his dead obsession. A man who desecrates Catherine's grave so that he can feel her body one more time. How on earth you can look at that character and say it's romantic is entirely lost on me. He is also 100% not white. Nellie. Nellie's casting was fine. Her being played by someone with Vietnamese ancestry didn't seem shocking and wasn't out of place, so that isn't the conversation that we're going to be having here. I feel like removing the character of Lockwood, though, removes a lot of Nellie's character. She's just a background character in the movie, whereas in the book, 90% of the story is told through her perspective. She's the heart of the novel, and she really loves Cathy and Heathcliff, and this shows through her narration. By removing her role of narrator, she's just a side character who's shown to be a little bit more important than Joseph, but less so than Isabella. I would have liked to have seen more of her. Edgar. Shazad Latif. You're gonna tell me that you decided to cast Jacob Elordi as Heathcliff and then hire a British Pakistani man to play Edgar Linton? Do I need to say more? If you're wanting to cast people while aging up the characters that they're supposed to play, then this dude's your Heathcliff. It would have been near perfect casting, but you decided to cast a tall, white Australian man. There are so many conversations to be had about casting people based on race, and there are tons of jokes on the internet about companies like Netflix changing the race of characters to fit some form of race quota. A real disgusting term. equal opportunity is king. And for tons of roles, it really shouldn't matter what the race of a character is. But part of the reason that Cathy marries Edgar is because of the racial prejudices of the time. By race swapping Edgar and Heathcliff, you remove this huge plot point. Race and racism are such a huge part of this book, and this adaptation just decided to throw that out of the window. I just get the feeling that Emerald Fennell wanted to focus on the relationship between Heathcliff and Cathy, which is fine. If that's the story that you want to tell, it's fine. But it's not Wuthering Heights. While reading, I also liked the character of Linton, and while he was a bit of a weakling compared to the hulking build of Heathcliff, he really loved Cathy and only wanted the best for her. When he saw that her relationship with Heathcliff was not healthy for her, he told her to stop seeing him. Of course, there was a bit of jealousy involved in that decision, but I really believe that it came from a place of love for her and wanting the best for her. Also, he just didn't get enough screen time for the audience to feel this love. Isabella. So, in terms of casting, we have something very weird. They changed Isabella from Edgar's sister to his ward, so there's no reason for her to look like Shahzad Latif. So why didn't you cast a blonde girl to play Isabella like her description in the book? Because that would make her look too much like Margot Robbie. So why didn't you cast Alison Oliver to play Catherine? And have a girl with dark hair and darker eyes play a character with dark hair and dark eyes? I don't understand what they did to her character. She was, at first, of course, fooled into loving Heathcliff, but their relationship was not some fun game with kinky sex. All of her actions in the movie seemed like the actions of a child, which is good at first because she's supposed to be a child, or, young in the book. But everyone else in the movie is like 30 instead of being book-aged, and it comes across like she's just being groomed by Heathcliff. It's weird as hell. In the book, she isn't freed from Heathcliff when Cathy dies. She manages, after months of torture, to escape from the Heights, and flees to Thrushcross Grange. It's strongly implied that Heathcliff sexually abused her too, not just hit her, and it can be assumed that her pregnancy is from one of these assaults. She flees from Heathcliff to the point of not even feeling safe at the Grange. She literally flees to London or the South to get away from him, which makes it all the much sadder when Linton, her and Heathcliff's son, is then forced to come back to the Heights. Isabella could get away, but not her son. She's such a good character in the book, and just a toy in the movie. Joseph. I'm really confused by the casting choice for Joseph. Again, referring to the book, Chapter 1, Page 1, Joseph was an elderly, nay, an old man. Very old, perhaps, though hale and sinewy. Joseph's supposed to be much older than Cathy and Heathcliff. There are points in the novel where younger Cathy and Heathcliff are supposed to sit through Bible lectures from Joseph, and I just feel that if he was the same age as them, or just like 3-4 years older than them, then they wouldn't have had to put up with sitting through them. So having him appear to be the same age as Margot Robbie and Jacob Elordi seemed like an odd choice. I always saw someone like David Bradley playing Joseph, and as he's from Yorkshire, I think it would have been an almost perfect casting choice. But seeing as they removed everything interesting about his character, then what's the point of even including him? He doesn't have his old Yorkshire dialect, he isn't a religious zealot, and he doesn't have any anger issues. Joseph is only used in the movie to show Cathy what we can presume to be her first sexual experience. He cracks a whip at Zillah, who's also pretty much removed from the story, and then puts a horse's bridle over her head and the bit into her mouth before shagging her. Something that is completely against Joseph's religious morals in the book. I also think it's very important to show that the cruelty Heathcliff has in him can also be found in others. And I think it's very important to show that the cruelty in Joseph, someone who is a pious man of God, comes from his religious teachings. The beatings that Heathcliff received from Joseph probably also shaped his cruelty, not just the ones from Hindley. I just get this feeling like in the book, and hear me out on this, Joseph is supposed to be the most weird comic relief character that's possible to create, and he just isn't that in the movie. He's there for like 2 scenes, and that's it. The character ages matter. The characters in the book are supposed to be young, and the fact that they weren't being played by young actors made all of their actions seem insane. Instead of looking at these teenagers being awful people because they're kids, they're fully grown adults, behaving like children. It was like watching an episode of Real Housewives. Kathy is a teenager in the book. You can understand why she still pines for her first love, and why she still thinks about Heathcliff in his absence. In the movie, he goes away for, I think they say, like 5 years, and I just couldn't help thinking that if, at the youngest possible age, Margot's Catherine was like 23 when Heathcliff left, she would have been 28 when he came back. Meaning that this girl has had a fully developed frontal lobe for 3 years, and yet the moment Heathcliff comes back, she turns back into a teenager. It's really weird. Margot Robbie is a 35-year-old woman pretending to be a 25, 28-year-old woman who's behaving like a 15-year-old girl. It's uncomfortable to watch. The actions of everyone else, Heathcliff, Edgar, and Isabella, are also made stranger because of the age increase. It's just a weird choice for this book. The love in the movie doesn't feel real. There's not enough time to establish real love between Kathy and Heathcliff. We're told that Kathy loves him, but we don't see it. Yeah, they spend all their time together, but it doesn't feel like love. In the scene where Kathy tells Nellie that she's accepted Edgar's proposal, she says that she loves Edgar, but we did not feel that either. Yeah, she cries, but it just seems to come from nowhere. We don't have enough intimate moments between Kathy and Edgar to believe in her confession. Her love to Edgar just comes across as superficial. It just comes across like she really loves Heathcliff, but she's going to marry Edgar because he's minted. Whereas in the book, we know that they've had enough time together to fall in love, making Kathy's confession all the more painful. When Kathy and Heathcliff start their affair in the movie, there's a scene where they go to this sort of structure to be protected from the rain. It's that same stone gazebo that they were in when they were younger. They're both soaking wet, and Heathcliff gives his coat to Kathy to keep her warm. And I truly believe that the scene was trying to copy the rain scene from Pride and Prejudice 2005 with Kira and Matthew in the rain, without understanding why that scene works. It tried to evoke the same romantic feelings that we all felt watching Darcy's first proposal, and yet in this movie, this scene just feels flat. There was no reward. Yeah, they kissed, but I never felt like I was rooting for them, so there was no payoff. And the whole movie kind of feels like that. Now, at the end of the movie, I did feel a bit moved. Jacob Elordi's acting when Kathy died was great, even if he went full Australian when he called for a doctor. It moved me a little. It was the only time in the movie where I felt like he loved her though. So trying to sell the movie as the greatest love story ever told just seems like false advertising. Adapt the whole book. No one, to my understanding, has ever adapted the whole book. They always go to the point where Kathy dies, and leave the movie as a weird love story. But as someone who has read, narrated, and then edited that narration of this book, that just kind of feels like mixing flour, eggs, milk, and sugar in a bowl and telling everyone that you made a cake without putting it in the oven. Catherine dies in the book at chapter 16. That's less than halfway through the novel. The hatred for Edgar and the revenge that Heathcliff wishes to take out against Kathy continues for 14 more chapters. I understand that Emerald Fennell wanted to make a sexy romance movie, but in that case, this book is not the one to adapt. This is a story of obsession and revenge, not a sexy love story. Honestly, I believe that this could have been an okay movie, maybe even a good movie, if it wasn't sold as an adaptation of Wuthering Heights. You could have had the same script and just changed the character names and moved the location from the Yorkshire moors to the Lancashire moors. People would have said, oh, I think this was inspired by some of the themes in Wuthering Heights. And that would have been the end of the conversation. But because Wuthering Heights was slapped onto it, no matter how much you want to say, I tried to make something that made me feel like I felt when I first read the book as a teenager. Your audience isn't going to judge you for how you felt when you first read the book, but for how faithfully you adapted one of the best books ever written in English literature. Emerald Fennell, I have nothing against you. and I truly believe that you have been able to capture a niche in filmmaking that has been missed, and it's truly a pleasure to see films with lewd sexual themes directed and written by women. But when adapting a book, if you're going to market it as book name, then adapt the book. Adding quotation marks doesn't give you permission to do what you please with the source material. Going back to my how to make an adaptation remarks from the start of the video, I think that when you want to adapt a novel into film, you should make the audience want to read the book. And I felt like after watching Wuthering Heights by Emerald Fennell, people are going to be confused and maybe disappointed. Probably disappointed. People are definitely going to buy the book after watching the movie. There were people in my cinema that I overheard while the credits were rolling talking about buying the book. But with this movie adaptation, people are going to be looking for a court of thorns and roses. And Wuthering Heights just isn't that. Thank you so very much for watching. If you enjoyed this and you want more book adaptation reviews, there will indeed be more to come. I don't know how often they're going to be there, but I'm going to do more. I really enjoyed doing this, and I think maybe people would like to hear what I say. I don't know. Thank you so much for the 15,000 subscribers. I'm blown away by that amount. It's insane. I never thought that I'd get here, so thank you. I'd love to be able to hear what you thought about the movie in the comments below, and if you want to experience Wuthering Heights for the first time, or the umpteenth time, then please check out my audiobook, which is linked in the description box below. But to end, I think it's best to leave you with what is ultimately the greatest review in cinema history. Ellen on Letterboxd. Emily Bronte died of tuberculosis 177 years ago. Yet this adaptation is still the worst thing that has ever happened to her.